want this to be an informal period in which you will just speak up, say what's on your mind. I'll start here anyway, though, and then we'll see. This first question, why did Christ say, "Not my will, but thine be done," if we are not to pray, "If it be thy will"? I gather that whoever asked this question was not here last night, because I gave a whole lecture last night on this subject. Briefly, it is, we should always say, "Not my will, but thine be done," in a prayer of decision, if we're deciding what we should do. But we should never say it in a prayer of faith. Now, I'm not going to talk more about this, because, as I say, I've already answered this question in a whole hour's period. But if whoever wrote it wants further illumination, you'll find it in my new book, Behold Your God. Now, these others are on prayer groups, directly or indirectly. Should a prayer group pray for people who have not asked for prayer? Should the group go and pray at the home of the sick? Those are two very good questions. Praying for those who have not asked for prayer, only God can tell you when to do so and when not to do so, but I will say this. I do not think that we are always required to do so. And I will say that so far as I know, Jesus never did. The only times when he prayed for someone who did not personally ask were when some other person who was responsible in the family, like the father or the centurion who asked him to pray for his servant, or somebody like that, asked in the name of the sick person. And they did that when the sick person was either too sick to come and ask, or if they were mentally or emotionally disturbed. So therefore, I do not feel that prayer groups must feel that they've just got to do it, that when they know of anybody who is sick, they just must do it. I do not feel that. And I feel that there is a danger of making the prayer list too long, and then the people in the group just feel discouraged if you add on too many names and too many names. However, there are times when people would ask if only they knew that there was a power that heals. And there are times when they just don't know enough to ask, but God does want the prayer group to pray for people. And so therefore, I say, don't feel you've got to, but if you really want to real bad with all the love of your heart, that is probably God's guidance saying to do so. There are times when it works. But I want to add this. If you pray for someone who is sick and they make a recovery, I do feel that sometime they should be told that God had helped them. You remember Jesus said to the man, he said, "Go thy way and sin no more, lest a worse thing happen unto thee." If God has really done a miracle for us, then we should know it so that we can thank him and praise his name and try to do something for him, you see. And if we do not know it, then we are sinning. It's a sin of ingratitude. And also, if the person does not know it, then they lose the opportunity for their spirit to make a new growth. So I feel that the person who suggests to the prayer group, pray for this one, that person has got the responsibility of seeing that the one who is prayed for is told it either before or afterwards. Sometimes it's better to afterwards, because if you tell them before, they wouldn't believe and the prayer would not go through. Sometimes it's better to tell them before. If they would cooperate in faith, if they knew the prayer group was praying for them, they should know before. Actually, they should make the request themselves. Actually, they should. But if you want to take a chance on it and try it anyhow, then you must realize that the final thing, the most important thing, is the healing of their souls, of their spirits. It's not going to do them any good in the long run, not much good anyway, if the body gets well, but the soul makes no growth on account of it, you see. So there is the further responsibility of telling them and teaching them. Should the group go and pray at the home of the sick? Now, this is tremendously important. And I do feel that either the group, and not always, it would seldom be the whole group, I should think, because most prayer groups are a little too big, it would be awkward, but I do feel it is tremendously important either for the person who gives the name to the group, or for, say, 2 or 3 members of the group to go and pray at the home of the sick. That's what Jesus always did. There are only 2 stories of when he just used intercession alone and nothing else, when he sent his power to someone at a distance, the centurion's son and the centurion's servant. And in both cases, he felt he could do so because there was such great faith on the part of the centurion, and because the sick person was obviously too sick to come to him. But in every other case that I know about, he prayed in the immediate presence of the person. Now, as a matter of fact, I haven't read through all these, and I do not know whether there's going to be a question about what can you do if a prayer group seems to lose power, seems to go dead or go stale. But I do know that they sometimes do get very dead and very stale. I have been to some prayer groups where the whole thing just seemed so heavy, just like I could feel the prayers just drop down at my feet. Just dead. Why? The chief reason is because in such prayer groups, they did not take the trouble, any of them, to go see these people. That's the chief reason. A prayer group should be a kind of a first aid station to leap to the rescue of an immediate crisis and immediate necessity. And it should also be a way of following up the personal work. But a prayer group is no substitute for personal work. The personal work is the most important thing of all. Jesus didn't say to his disciples, now sit down in Jerusalem and have a prayer group for all these people. He said, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature and heal the sick and say unto them, the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. The personal work is far more important, far more important. It's what people need. Even in the simplest terms, they need to know that you care enough about them to go see them. And quite frankly, if you don't care enough to go see them, then why should you expect the prayer group to do all your work for you? That's a lazy way to be a Christian. They need to know that you care enough to bother to go see them. Now, if you don't dare say a prayer out loud, you can just take them a bunch of flowers or something. Just simply go see them. Show that you care about them. Bring them the love of Christ. Now, that's the first and the simplest thing. You can pray for them in your mind if you don't dare to say it out loud. You can pray for them with the laying on of hands without saying a word to embarrass yourselves, if you care to. And indeed you should. It's perfectly natural when you go see a person to sit by the bed and touch the hand or hold the hand or put your hand lightly on the brow or on the shoulder or something. It's so absolutely natural that no one will think anything about it. Nobody will think you're queer the least bit. You don't have to say, now this is prayer with the laying on of hands or anything like that if you don't want to, but you can just do it. And then in silence you can ask God to use you as a channel and increase his healing power in this person. Now that's the easiest way. But if you're a little more bold and brave, and if you are so guided, you can go just a bit further. The next easiest way is to say, you know, God has great power, but it's up to us to believe, and I would like to ask the prayer group to pray for you, and I'll be praying for you. And you would be perfectly surprised how often even the people that you might think are quite cold and hard and unbelieving will just melt when you say that, and the tears will come into their eyes with relief and with joy. Lots of people, that's exactly what they want some Christian person to say, just exactly what they want. Many people don't dare to believe anymore that anybody cares enough to pray for them. But they would love it. Now, of course, there are some people might be sniffy and snuffy, but you're pretty sure to know if you ask for counsel. If you ask God to tell you, you'll be pretty sure to know. Then, of course, if you want to go one step further, you might dare to say, I'd like to pray for you. Could we have a little prayer together right now and just pray for them right in their immediate presence? As St. James says, let them call the elders of the church together and let them pray over them. You see the picture of them standing by the bed and praying over them, probably with the laying on of hands. Yes, I think that is a matter of tremendous importance. And in my own prayer groups, I'll tell you, I don't have anybody in the prayer group that doesn't do that because I don't have time. Now, I don't say you should follow that rule. I only say that I only have time, to have the very most, kind of prayer group that is of the utmost use. And so everybody that comes to the prayer group does do this kind of thing, this personal work. Very simply, very humbly, and unobtrusively, but they do it. When praying for loved ones who is unsaved, how do we believe for them? Well, I don't know any way of believing for them. I mean, they can't be saved just by you believing for them. I mean, after all, God gave them free will, and you cannot superimpose your will on their will. But however, you can pray for the love of Christ to be very near to them and for the Holy Spirit to knock on the doors of their minds, as it were, so that they will come to believe. When a prayer group is satisfied with the way they are, what do you do? That's a good question. That's a good question, and yet, I think sometimes a prayer group can be satisfied with the way they are in a perfectly good way. I don't think that they necessarily have to be proud or conceited. I mean, I sometimes think that there is a little group that are in such complete rapport that they just think, now, this is fine. The six of us, we really get results. Let's stay this way. Now, the answer is, if they do really get results, well, sure, let them stay that way. As I said, people are not standardized, and you can't make them standardized, no matter how hard you try. And it's very important in prayer groups to have people who are of one accord and in one mind, and that doesn't mean just people that don't fuss with each other. I don't know how to explain what it means. Don't know how to explain. It's people who just naturally have a certain, what you call, rapport. Their minds just click alike. Their minds just think alike. There's a spiritual kinship and alikeness. Sometimes it's very hard to tell who will fit into a prayer group and who will not. But if you have that kind of a group that is, at least for the moment, content because they are doing good work, because when they pray for people, they do get well and the results follow, well, fine. They can praise the Lord for it and not praise themselves, but I don't think they should be disturbed or shaken up. Now, I'll give you a little suggestion about trying out new people in that kind of a prayer group. A small intensive prayer group. I'll tell you a secret. I'll tell you how I do. How I do is to invite somebody to come once. These little intensive prayer groups, you understand, I'll talk again presently about bigger ones. These little intensive ones are private. I mean, it's a little group of friends that meet, probably in somebody's home. They may have a cup of tea. There's no reason why they should open it to everybody, and they don't. That's not the way that they operate, these little groups. And so if we think, I wonder if so-and-so would fit into this group and add power, then maybe I will invite that one and just say, would you like to come Thursday afternoon? Some of us are going to meet for a few prayers. I thought you might like to. And try and see whether it adds power or whether it disturbs the group. Now, sometimes, quite frankly, it disturbs the group, and it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just that their thought vibrations, you might say, flow to a different rhythm. So much for that kind of a little group. Now, that's one type of prayer group. I usually have, when I'm home long enough, I have both types. I have one open prayer group in the church that's open to everybody, you see, and that combines a bit of teaching, a Bible class combined with a prayer group. And that has tremendous value, and the value is in teaching and in getting others interested. But then out of that, there usually grows maybe one or two or three smaller prayer groups of those that are just in rapport. Their minds, and they just think alike. So there's value in both kinds. Now, however, if there is a prayer group, large or small, who are satisfied with themselves but who do not get results. That would be different. If they just go on praying for people and praying for people, but there's nothing, so far as you can tell, no special results, then that's different. Now, what would you do about that kind of a group? There are various things that you can do. The first thing I've already suggested, namely, that everybody in the group take on one person on the list as their responsibility and go to see them and talk to them. And those that don't want to do that, let them drop out of the group. That will be one way. Another way, sometimes a group like that is really too big, and sometimes it divides up into several smaller groups. That may be the answer. There's a group in Philadelphia with 80 people, led by a wonderful woman. It's a splendid group. But what they do is they divide into 10 smaller groups. Now, the way they do it is they just draw names out of a hat or something. You see, that's wonderful. It succeeds with them. They get away with it. But they divide into smaller groups, and the smaller groups meet once a week, and then maybe 4 times a year, all the groups meet together. And then perhaps once a year, they reshuffle themselves and draw out the names again. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way. I suggest that is one way to do. Because sometimes a group really needs to be shaken up and reshuffled, you might say. And there again, that's nobody's fault. It just means that new life sometimes comes in when it is thus reshuffled. And again, sometimes a group is too large. And the trouble with a group being too large is that everybody that comes naturally has several people on their minds they want to pray for. And when the group is too big, it just makes the list too long and the load too heavy, and so therefore it may be good to divide. Now, there again, I might suggest, if you want to try dividing up your prayer group, why not just try it as an experiment for a limited period of time? Why not just say, for instance, during the 6 weeks of Lent or during the summer months or something like that, let's try doing this in a different way and divide into 3 or 4 little groups or something like that. Again, it sometimes is no harm, really, to discontinue the prayer group, say, during the summer. Not because you're being lazy, but, well, it just makes a change. And it gives people time to sort of gather into themselves and rethink things inside of themselves and then come together in the fall. Now, what suggestions do you people have now about these? Because I'd like to hear some others. Well, if you don't, I'll answer these other questions, and then I will sit down there, and maybe somebody else will have some thoughts. How often should your prayer list be revised? You can't make hard and fast rules about these things, but I kind of follow the system that Silent Unity follows. After all, they've done it very many years, and they are a very powerful prayer group. And so their system is that after 30 days, the name is automatically dropped from the list, unless the person renews their request and states how they are getting along, you see. And I think that's a very good rule. I don't carry anyone more than 30 days unless they do. Should the names on it be mentioned daily and individually? Now, that's a good question. That depends, of course, on your list. It's lovely when you have a small enough group and a secret enough group so that you can just do your own praying. Really, actually, it has advantages. Because then you can, not that you meet together every day. Most groups meet only once a week. Some meet once in 2 weeks. But many of them decide that they will pray every day. Sometimes they say at a certain time of day. I don't know that that really makes much difference, what time of day, whether they all hit the same time. I think it's more important for each one who does the praying to have choose one particular time for her and keep that hour every day. Or for him, whether or not everybody chooses the same hour. So if you've got a small enough group and a small enough list, it's very lovely if you can mention them all every day in your own private prayers. I would say not more than perhaps 12. But if you've got a great long list, now if you can do it, fine. I know some people that say they can do it. I don't see how they do it, but if they can, that's fine. When I say can, what I mean is not just open your mouth and say the word, but what I mean is If you can do it with a real feeling of power, fine. If you have that much time, fine. But most people, if the list gets too long, they just simply cannot mention them all individually every day. And really, I do find that if you have a prayer group that is really filled with the love of Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, you can say out loud individually the ones you are most interested in, which does not mean just your personal interest because it's your nephew or somebody. It means because they need it the most, you see. Of course, you can pray for your nephew too. But I do think that it's a sin before the Lord to limit your prayers only to those people that are in your church and family, and keep on and on and on and on and on and on praying for them till the cows come home, and not take time to pray for the really serious life and death, desperate cases that may come to your mind. I think it's a sin before the Lord. And if you want to ask me why most prayer groups, or why many prayer groups, or I put it this way, the main reason why prayer groups tend to lose their power, the reason is selfishness. Now that I say, I mean right out and out. That is the reason. Selfishness. Selfishness. Some groups just more and more form the habit of using the prayer group as a convenient dumping ground to dump their personal, private interests and concerns. I remember I went to one time, and I'm going to tell you it's the last prayer group I've ever spoken to. I decided then I won't do it anymore. I prefer an open group like this. Loads of people from loads of prayer groups, yes. But not just one little prayer group. Never done it since. So in this prayer group, I gave a talk on prayer, and then I said, now in our prayer time, you might give me about 4 names, special ones, those with special needs. They gave me 4 names, and every one of them was for some near relative who did not have a special need at all. They were recovering from an operation and doing nicely, or else it was a child who needed some continuing help, but the help was coming and had been for years, or something like that. Not a single one of them was an emergency, life and death matter, not a one. And when I prayed, there was no power. In fact, I could just feel God turn his face away. I could just feel my prayers. I could almost hear them thump as they hit the floor. I thought, oh, what's wrong? What is it? Something's wrong. On the way home, one of the women said in the car, we were talking about polio, and she said, oh, there's a lovely young ministerial student who's dying of polio today. I said, why didn't you tell me? That's the one God wanted us to pray for. Why didn't you do it in the prayer group? His life could have been saved. I said, why didn't somebody give me that name? She said, well, I guess nobody thought of it. Why did nobody think of it? Selfishness. That doesn't mean we should never pray for our own. I'm sure you do know what I mean. This writing looks like mine, and I can't always read my writing. I think this is, do you have your notice in the bulletin every week that your group meets, even though you have a larger prayer service the same day? Well, if it is the 2 kinds of groups I told you about, if this is the bigger group that's combined with an instruction class and is open to everybody, I think it's very nice indeed to have it in the bulletin, very nice indeed. Even though the members of the group know it, I think it's a good testimony to the other people in the congregation that here's the group that prays. Yes, indeed, I do. If it is the little compact group of just a few friends who meet together privately, why then, of course, no. Should a prayer group take or make all offerings? Is that all or what? An offering, monetary. Well, that depends upon the need. I don't think they necessarily should. In fact, most ones that I know, most of the ones don't. The little prayer groups never do. And I'll tell you one thing I don't like is when occasionally somebody in the congregation says to the prayer group, well, why don't you do something? Why don't you earn some money toward our new budget or something like that? No, I don't think I don't approve of that at all. The purpose of the prayer group is to pray, and I do not think they should be turned into a money-making outfit in any way at all. But however, occasionally there is some kind of a need. Now, in a parish, in some large parishes, there really and truly is a need for, well, what shall I say, a parish visitor for the purpose of healing. Now, this probably does not come to your attention, but I do mention this. I mentioned this in my new book, Behold Your God. I don't think the prayer group should make the offering. I think those that get well should make the offering. I think those for whom the prayer group prays and those who make a recovery, I think that they should be instructed and taught, as you've been told here, quite truthfully and frankly. It's part of the spiritual law. And I think in some way they should be instructed and taught that it is good for them to make a thank offering, not to the prayer group, but to the church. Or if there is some special worker there doing it, and if that special worker has a need of money, then I think that they should make a thank offering. Not as a fee or required thing, but just out of the love of their hearts. Now, I can say this because I am not in a position to need it, and because my work is the work of teaching and not of doing this, so I can say it. In the old years, when I was in a position to need it, of course I could not say it, you understand. If anyone nowadays gives me any kind of a thank offering, I do not keep it myself. I give it to my secretary or to the School of Pastoral Care. It is welcome, it is used in God's work, but I do not need the kind of thank yous that come in letters, you see. I don't need it personally. But I'm going to say this, though, because I want you to think about how to solve this problem, because it's a very real problem in some places. I have 3 women friends who are simply marvelous at healing prayer. I mean, they're more than just the ordinary prayer group members. They are those, all 3 of them, who are so very, very good at it that they are continually in demand. Now, one of them worked as a secretary to earn her living, and every single minute when she wasn't in the office, people were calling on her. In fact, a friend would even call up and say, I've arranged for you to go to the hospital and see somebody during your lunch hour, so that she didn't have time to have lunch. Nobody ever thought of giving her any kind of thank offering of any sort or description, and the result was she became desperately ill. And the doctor said to her, you must stop this kind of work. You're killing yourself. She made a tremendous act of faith, and she decided instead of that to stop her secretarial work and pray that God would put into the hearts of people who could see by taking one look at her house that she was not a woman of means. I mean, that was obvious. And they would know that she'd had to give up her secretarial work to do this, and so she prayed that God would put it into their hearts to give her some spontaneous expression of thanks. Now, I'm glad to have a chance to mention this, because many people have a squeamish feeling that they should never do that. They think it's unworthy and so on and so forth. They think if people are real good and spiritual, they don't need to eat. Actually, to give some kind of an offering in lieu of a salary to someone who does this type of personal work is exactly the same thing as giving it to a minister. When a minister baptizes a baby, he doesn't feel he is the one who saves the baby's soul. He knows God is. But God needs him to be the channel. You see? It's exactly the same thing, just exactly. And people have recognized that a minister has got to eat at least something. And so there is an arrangement for a salary. Now, in the case of this little girl I'm telling you about, she's managing. She's getting by, partly through my help, because when I turn over people to her, I tell them like I'm telling you. I say this child has nothing to live on at all except what people give her out of the love of their hearts. I say to them, now, I'm just telling you this, and you will know what to do. See? So, but the other 2 have both collapsed. This one is nearer to me. I can help a bit. The other 2 have both collapsed. One of them had to go and work in an airplane factory because of this financial need. She used to spend her entire time in service to people. They never even gave her enough to pay her bus fare. She had an invalid daughter, and her husband had an invalid mother, and I don't know what all they had to look after, and an afflicted brother, and so on and so forth. Had to have it. So she had to totally give up this work and go to work in an airplane factory. She's now on what looks like her deathbed, and it's very hard to pray for her because she doesn't want to get well. She doesn't want to get well. She's utterly disillusioned. And with the third one, the same thing has happened. She's had to give it up. People have lost this great power they could have had, and the reason they lost it was, and I don't think it's ungenerosity, I think it's because nobody told them, and they had this funny feeling it wasn't right, you see. So that's why I'm telling you. Because people could have saved these three women and had their constant services if there was some kind of a thank offering given. So, however, I still don't think it's the prayer group should do it. And it's a very delicate question. You cannot say to people, now I've prayed for you, you should give a thank offering. But you can do this when people say, oh, I'm so grateful, what can I do? Then you can say to them, well, my dear, it would be lovely if you would put an offering in the plate at church, you see, or something like that. If enough people would do that in a great big church, and if that offering was known as something for this work, then don't you see it would be possible for the church and the minister to engage some person, man or woman, as a parish visitor for the purpose of healing. Yeah, I do know one church who has done that. You see? So now, perhaps I've talked too much about that point. Prayer group, I don't quite get it. Two stereotyped uses of prayer form. Oh, the question seems to be whether prayer groups should have stereotyped prayer forms with no spontaneous prayer. Well, I don't think anyone can just say, because I think it depends on whatever the prayer group wants. There should be great freedom in the prayer group. And if there is a prayer group in a ritualistic church that is used to having a stereotyped form, you know, then I don't see that there's anything wrong in that. It's just like when we come to morning prayer and evening prayer. We do have the printed prayers. If that suits them and they have the feeling of adding their own prayers to it, that's perfectly all right, seems to me. However, I will say that in my own prayer groups, we have not done that, but we have just asked the Lord to come in and touch our hearts and enlighten our spirits, and the prayers have been quite free and spontaneous. However, if some people have the feeling of prayer but say that they cannot pray aloud, it embarrasses them to pray aloud, then they just pray in silence. Now, these are all the questions that I have, and I've talked long enough, so